a GLP-1 all by itself, this kind of standalone thing with no consideration for everything else, will in all likelihood fail based on what is it that you're trying to achieve.
Right.
Right.
Welcome back to the Everything GLP-1 podcast. My name is Dr. Tom Lavin. We cover everything on the GLP-1 front, and the goal of this podcast is to help patients maximize their health and get as much advantage from what we present as possible. Today, I'm very fortunate to have Lucas Irwin with me. Lucas is a life coach that teaches the physical benefits and mental benefits of living life, works with large corporations like Google and US Cellular, and also works with a lot of individuals, CEOs of corporations down to just any individual. So super happy to have you here. And, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing lately.
Yeah. So, as part of Rebel Health, we kind of have two, we could call it quote unquote divisions, right? Even though one of them is a little unofficial, you won't find it on the website, but it's really the root of where I started, which was working with individuals. So coaching a lot of executives, CEOs, entrepreneurs, on just how to live a healthier, happier life. And so that encompasses a lot of different things, right? There's the physical, there's the mental, there's the general lifestyle, communication, relationships, all of that.
Right.
And I largely view it as kind of integrative health coaching, and integrative in the sense of like, it just takes every component of our well-being and looks at how do these things work together. And so it's very different from person to person.
Right.
Some people are just stressed and anxious out of their mind. And it's like, okay, this is what we need to address. And for other people, it's, finding gratitude, joy, satisfaction, getting better sleep, exercising more, changing what they're eating. So it's really kind of finding out about the individual and what it is that they need right now. And then in these long-term relationships, adapting to what their life is bringing, right?
Right.
And so over time, that eventually started to move into some corporate coaching. And that largely initially came from the individuals I was working with in some kind of form saying, this is amazing, this is helping me so much. I want this for my team. I want this for my people, right? And initially, early on, pre-COVID, I was pretty resistant to corporate training because it was a lot of box checking.
Right.
We're going to fly you out, talk to everybody for 60 minutes, and then we can tell everybody we did it and put it on social media.
Right.
And it looks great.
Right.
And I could tell them that's not helping anybody.
Right.
You're not changing anything in 60 minutes. This has to be an ongoing relationship. But lo and behold, COVID comes, and all of a sudden, rightfully so, companies started valuing that type of coaching for their employees much more.
Right.
Which I love, because when you make that kind of investment, you're helping so many more people, right? Same amount of time, an hour with an individual or an hour with a team could be the difference between helping one person or 4,000 people at once. So Rebel Health has largely shifted its outward focus to corporate training, and constantly working to just help people live, that healthier, happier life individually, which in turn will help the organization, right?
Exactly.
Happy, healthy organizations are made up of happy, healthy individuals.
Exactly. And I can vouch
Absolutely.
because Lucas works with my companies and all my employees, and they are extremely happy. It's, brought a lot of value because everyone has areas of their life where, I'm doing great here and here, but right here, I really need help. So you've been able to fill that void with my employees. And just for me, I want the healthiest, happiest employees because, that's, how you should live your life.
Right.
And it helps everything from the businesses to just their personal lives. So you've done a fantastic job. And I know some of them you've picked up personally, but, from a corporate level, it's been great.
So, yeah, and it's always been there's a foundational component, which is presence and being more mindful, right?
Right,
It really is a foundational component of everything that we talk about. I don't know if there's a single topic that we ever discuss that you can honestly discuss without bringing in this component of being more mindful and present and aware. Because when we talk about these things, we're talking about growing and making change in our life. Good luck making change in your life anywhere other than the moment that you're in right now.
right,
Otherwise, you're just thinking about it. Someday I'm going to do this. In the future, I'll do this. Tomorrow, I'll try to do this. But the change happens right here because that's the only place that there's any room to actually take action.
right,
And, so often people have kind of the framework and the bullet points and the ideas of what they need to do, but they're so disengaged and they're so not present that the moments that they need to be there for in order to implement these things, they're not.
right,
Right? So they're constantly missing the opportunity and looking back and being like, "Oh, crap. That's what I should have done." Right? I should have, you know, not picked up and eaten that thing that I picked up and ate. I should have not spoke up. I should have spoke up, whatever it might have been. And it really helps people shift more to, I love the idea of shifting away from being reactive to being responsive,
right,
right? And when you're not present, what happens is you react in your natural, habitual kind of way. And then 10 minutes later or 10 days later, you look back and you're like, that's not what I wanted to do. I've been
exactly.
telling myself I wanted to do it this other way. Um, so, as you know, the kind of mental frameworks that we explore are everything, right? Because it's so much about, being present and reframing the way that we relate to life, the way that our relationship with a lot of these things that we talk about, is everything, because
Everything,
that's
yeah.
where all the opportunity comes from to make change.
I I love that because as physicians, so we have our big, GLP-1 practice, Your Era,
Yep.
and from a physician standpoint, we take care of the patient,
Yep.
and our whole goal is to help them lose weight, maintain their muscle mass, and hydrate, and get better sleep, and all these things. But at the end of the day, if you have no relationships and you're not
Yeah.
present,
Right.
what are you doing, man? Like,
Absolutely.
you're super healthy and everything's great, but you have to be aware of this moment
Yeah.
and you have to have relationships in your life. That's
Right.
where your richness comes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, because it's all part of a much bigger picture. Right. And so often people fail at different pursuits in their life because they put all of their focus on one specific thing. Right. And from a pure goal setting standpoint, that can make sense. But i- the reason it oftentimes doesn't work is because they're not focused on the most important problem. They're just focused on the one that they think they want to change the most.
Right.
Right. So even with things like that, just social relationships and connection, et cetera, if that's a kind of a root problem that's bleeding into a lot of other parts in our life, but we skip over that and we try to go treat the symptoms, it's never going to work,
Right.
right? Because it's still built on this really shaky foundation that we were like, I'm not going to address that. And we do a good job sometimes of convincing ourselves that that might be a problem and I know it's a problem, but I'm going to focus on this and this will somehow magically fix that,
Right.
right?
Not gonna
And it
happen.
never happens,
Right.
right?
And that's kind of the way I look at things. You can have the most successful person in the world, but they're not present and they don't have relationships. So in my, personal feeling, they're missing it. I
Yeah,
mean, life's going by and
yeah,
um but I want to jump back to all of the physical
yeah,
things that we approach people and they come in and they want to lose weight. And GLP-1s obviously are this peptide
mhm,
that is changing the world in that it can actually change that defended set point in your brain to a lower point shut down that food noise, shut down the hunger cravings, get rid of that impulsive binge behavior,
Yep.
as well as a lot of other impulsive behaviors, and really correct things from a physical standpoint, normalize your blood sugars, and help you lose weight and get healthy.
Correct.
So, how would you approach a patient? Because it's not just about the GLP-1.
Right.
The GLP-1 will help you lose weight and it will change things. The program without a GLP-1 probably will fail.
Yep.
But let's start with GLP-1. What other things would
Yep.
you wrap around it to physically help this patient
Yep.
achieve the best success?
Yeah. So obviously, as you can imagine, over the past couple of years, just tons of clients of mine come to me with the question, I want to start taking a GLP-1. I'm thinking about taking a GLP-1. Do you think this would be a good idea? Is this supportive, et cetera? Um, and I usually come back to the idea, you mentioned it right there. It's like a GLP-1 all by itself, this kind of standalone thing with no consideration for everything else, will in all likelihood fail based on what is it that you're trying to achieve.
Right.
Right. And so what I always tell people is I want you to understand, GLP-1s are a tool, right? But your lifestyle and your mental well-being are still the foundation that that's built on. So it comes back to that idea we were talking about. If we're going to skip the foundation and go straight to just using the tool, you y- you might see something short term that makes you kind of happy, but eventually it's going to fall apart in one way or another,
Right.
right? So we have to be really honest with people about that. But I think it's important too because when we address these things, you're setting them up for so much more success and just to get more out of it in general, right? So there's certain things that will never not be true, whether you take a GLP-1 or whether you don't, right? Whether you take hormones or whether you don't. Like these are just fundamentally true and cannot be ignored, and nothing that you take will ever substitute any of these things. Exercise, both anaerobic and aerobic, so cardiovascular and resistance training.
Right.
Sleep, quality nutrition, mental well-being, social relationships. No matter what you're doing, those have to be prioritized.
Right.
And the danger comes from when people are not doing those things, that they believe any tool, not just a GLP, but anything, will somehow substitute them doing that and be like, well, if I do this, I don't have to think about those things anymore.
Right.
And that's just absolutely false.
I find it childish.
Correct.
You need to be an adult and understand
Right.
that there's no easy fix.
Right.
You have to do everything. The GLP-1s are a great start to, a cornerstone to help them lose weight.
Yep.
But if you're not doing some resistance training, weightlifting, making sure you get protein, hydration, adequate sleep,
Correct.
you're missing the big upside of really optimizing your health.
Absolutely. And so it kind of comes from just even the way that it's framed with people. Is I tell them, and it's important to distinguish between the two. If your goal is purely I just want to lose weight, that's different than saying I want to be healthier and losing weight is part of that.
Right.
Right? Because it's this understanding that that weight loss is supporting this bigger goal of wanting to be healthier. And being healthier includes all of that other stuff, right?
Right.
And that's a very different thing. They're both going to address losing weight, but it's the real motivation behind it. Because if it's just purely I just want to lose weight, right? And you don't have kind of this greater context of why you want to do so, it's never going to have the kind of long-term success that
Right.
the pursuit of being healthier is going to have.
Right.
Right. So I always want to make that clear with people. And it's okay, now because of that, you're introducing this new tool. Now, anytime you're introducing a new tool like this, whether it's hormone therapy or a GLP-1 or even just supplements for that matter, you're going to get so much more out of it by also incorporating these lifestyle changes.
Right.
The and these are all well researched. I mean, if it is from a weight loss standpoint, the amount of weight you lose with or without a GLP-1 when you're getting adequate sleep versus when you're not, massively different.
Oh, yeah.
Completely different because it impacts everything. Getting great sleep will supercharge these tools that you're doing. Not getting enough sleep will limit their effectiveness,
Right.
right? Exercise does the same thing. Putting quality food, high, nutrient dense food into your body. And then obviously those social components and the mental well-being components.
Right.
But it's got to be a comprehensive picture, and sometimes I think it's an opportunity. We do really well when we kind of compromise or negotiate with ourselves sometimes, where we kind of build in things almost as a reward, right? So if people are kind of on the fence of like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do it? I'm kind of thinking about it. Maybe make a deal with yourself of like, well, I'm not going to the gym, right? I'm not going as much as I want to. I'm going to make a deal with myself that says, if I'm going to do this, I'm only going to be able to do it if I also agree with myself to go do resistance training 2 times per week,
Right.
3 times, whatever it is. And there's that kind of trade-off. Like the one I mentioned to you, it's like, I want to watch this show at nighttime before I go to bed, right? But sometimes it feels better and we can watch it almost more guilt-free if we're like, but I also have to read, 15 pages at some point during the
Right.
day in order to watch my show. And you pair it with something that's just inherently good for you,
Right.
right? Not like in a torturous way of like, I got to make myself do something. But no, this is something that I should be doing. And it'll increase the benefit of this tool anyway.
Right.
Um, but as long as we can get away from the idea of like, anything kind of like from a supplemental or medication standpoint being this fixes everything, we cannot live with that delusion,
Right.
right? It absolutely has to be part of this bigger picture.
Yeah, for sure. And we try to impart that to all patients. And the other side of it is you don't have to run 10 miles a day or some crazy
Right.
thing. Do little things every day, those little daily habits
Yeah.
of maybe go run a mile, maybe do 100 push-ups or 50 push-ups. Do something.
Correct.
It might take you 15, 20 minutes,
Yep.
but do something every day
Yep.
and make that habit as opposed to talking about or think about when you're going to do it in the future. And I like making a deal with yourself is
Yeah.
great.
And make it really small. You and I have talked, I always talk about this idea of like these kind of through lines, right? Where there's certain things, whether it's your meditation or your exercise or whatever, that try to keep those part of your daily routine, no matter how small it is,
Right.
right? Where the routine itself becomes the habit. It's there. And, some days my workout is 40 minutes and some days it's 10 push-ups,
Right.
right? But it's there,
Right.
right? And really fight to keep that as like part of your daily routine. And for a lot of people who aren't doing any of those things, start with the smallest reasonable number you can think of, right? So I tell people this with meditation all the time. I want consistency above everything else. You don't need to try to, prove anything by doing 25, 45-minute meditations, etc. If what feels like I cannot come up with a rational reason not to do this every day, if that number is to stop for one breath every day, start there
Right.
and do it for 10 days in a row. And then slowly begin to build. But what you've done is you've kind of put your foot in the door of like,
Right.
this is showing up in my life every day, right? So maybe it's I meditate for one breath every day, and then I walk to the end of my driveway and back.
It's a
Great.
start.
You're exercising and you're meditating,
Right.
right? Is it going to make a measurable difference from the benefit of that moment? Probably nothing we could measure. But in terms of getting the ball rolling and actually doing something that's going to be measurable long term because that was the starting point from which you built upon,
Right.
huge difference.
Yep.
Right. But you be honest with yourself. Like, what is the amount that I could do that there's no way I could talk myself out of?
Right.
There's no way I can't find a way to do that.
Right.
Right. I'm going to do 2 squats and a 2 breath meditation.
Right. You
Come
can't
up
do
with a good
that.
reason why you can't do
Yeah.
that and you
I'm
know?
like, who's in charge of your life? Who's
Correct.
making your decisions?
Yeah, so start there.
A couple squats, 10 push-ups. I mean, do something.
Exactly, exactly. Change one thing in your nutrition, right? Take one thing out that you know you shouldn't be doing, or introduce one thing that you know that you need more of.
Right,
Really little things, but then stay on yourself to be like, okay, but I do have to look for opportunities to build this up, right?
right.
My one squat a day for the next 10 years isn't gonna help me
No
much,
big change. Yeah.
right? But it's much easier to build on once you break the ice.
Yep.
So
That's great. Yeah, you know, because I hear it all the time from patients, I'm getting started in like 2 weeks. I'm like, start right now.
yeah.
Like, come on, today's your
Yes.
day.
Yep.
This is the day to start.
Yeah, we love that idea of like starting on a Monday or the first of the month or January
Yeah, I'm like,
1st,
come on, man.
and
Yeah,
when we owned gyms, I used to say all the time when people would come in for their like free trial, if they came in on a Friday for their free trial to get started, it was almost like without fail, that person was gonna be pretty successful in their journey, right?
yeah.
Because they decided, I mean, it's the end of the week. I could easily just wait and start fresh on
Monday.
Monday,
Yeah,
right? But they came on a Friday,
right,
right? It's like something clicked, it's important. It's so important to me that I'm gonna go do it now and I'm not gonna wait.
right,
And I'm a real big believer in that idea of like, if it's important, start now. And I think by forcing yourself to start now, it it almost like rewires our brain in a way that like reinforces like this is clearly very important.
right,
So we'll be more likely to stick to it. Um, the minute we start putting things off, like I'm going to start this way, it'll be easier. I can, go to the grocery store and get set up, and it's like it sounds to me like you're just finding a reason to not start right now,
right.
right? A very well packaged, justified
Yeah,
reason, but
makes sense.
it's
Not
still
going
an
to work
excuse
for
not to.
you.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think the other thing I find is being accountable to someone where like, okay,
Yeah,
that makes you realize, I've got to do it. I always work out better
yeah,
if I have my guy coming to work out with me. Like
correct.
my workouts seem to be shorter
Yeah,
when it's just me. So being
yeah,
accountable to someone helps.
it does, and there's a science to the accountability part. We've talked about this in kind of like the goal setting stuff we've done
Mhm.
with the team. What kind of seems to be the sweet spot is telling one person, not telling everybody,
Right, right.
right? Especially on social media, right? And I think there's a natural tendency, very well like logical, to think if I tell everybody that this is what I'm going to do, I'm now accountable to that. It doesn't hold you anywhere near as accountable as you think it does,
Right.
right? Because we're also well aware that people are going to forget. The other problem with it is if you kind of jump on and say, this is what I'm going to do, right? It's January 1st. I'm going to post, this is my year. I'm going to
Tell the
lose 50
world.
pounds.
Yeah.
Let me tell everybody. The problem with that is, and it doesn't sound like a problem initially, is you're going to get bombarded with a tons of positive feedback. I believe in you. You can do it. This is your year. All of that is great, right? But you're
Yeah.
going to get this big, giant dose of like dopamine and positive reinforcement, and then probably none,
Right. It's
right?
going away.
But our reward system, it's kind of working things backwards. You're getting all of the reward before you did any of the work,
Right.
right? And we really want more of a structure of like work, 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 reward, work, 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 reward, not reward. Okay, now go do the work. Right? It's like giving somebody their paycheck before they've shown up to work. It's like how
Right.
motivated they're going to be to do a great job.
Right.
Um, but telling one person, right? Or telling nobody. For some people, the best thing to do is tell nobody, right? Because they may be really susceptible to anything other than people being really happy and motivated for them. We see this in entrepreneurship all the time that a lot of people, when they're kind of developing a business or an idea, they've learned what's best for themselves is to not tell anybody until it's pretty much done,
Right.
right? Because what they don't wanna do is be like, "Hey, this is my idea," and people are like, "That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
That's not a good idea.
All
What
the
makes you think
negative
you could do
feedback.
that?" Right?
Yeah.
Where they're just like, "Let me just do it." So, knowing yourself, but in most cases, it's having one person that can kind of check in with you and know whether you're doing what you need to be doing, like not what you need to be, but what you said you were going to be doing or not. Um, Somebody trustworthy. They're not your hype man. They're not there to jack you up every day,
Right.
but you know that somebody knows if you're doing it or not, right? And that can be really supportive.
So if you have someone coming in, say a 50-year-old, guy, and he just, hasn't really taken charge on the physical side, mental side,
Yep.
what recommendations would you make to him to, start working on the physical as well as the mental side?
Yep. I pretty much always, quote unquote, prescribe mindfulness based meditation. Again, coming back to it being a very foundational part of what we're talking about. And it just creates so much opportunity to build off of that.
Mhm.
When we're talking about, because ultimately when we're implementing things like, okay, what are we going to do lifestyle wise? We're
Right.
talking about behavior change.
Right.
And we need that present moment awareness component to really excel at behavior change
Right.
because you have to be there in the moments where it needs to happen.
Right.
And if you're spending 60% of your time thinking about what's next, you're just moving through
You're
on
not
autopilot
there.
all the
Yep.
time and it's not going to work. So we always do that, right? So there's always that part. But usually in addition to that, it's really hard to overlook immediately trying to get people to incorporate more resistance training. Our understanding of the impact of resistance training on our long-term well-being, particularly on health span as opposed to lifespan. What's the quality of your life going to look like as you get older? Muscle mass and strength are absolutely essential to that. So getting people in there and, especially if they haven't been doing it at all, it doesn't take very much, right? The baseline general recommendation is about 25 minutes twice a week.
Wow.
Very doable.
That doesn't sound like a lot.
It doesn't, but to go from nothing to that is a huge benefit,
Right.
right? Because it's just you're so adaptive at that point. So I really encourage people to do that.
What would you recommend for resistance training, weightlifting for someone that hasn't done it before?
Yeah. So in an ideal world, we want to be focusing on like the biggest bang for your buck movements, right? So multi-joint compound movements, presses and squats and all that kind of stuff. Depending on the person's background, right? So someone may have like no physical or athletic background whatsoever. So there's an increased risk of just, mild injury, et cetera, if they just go in and try to figure it out on their own.
Right.
The good news is there's more free information online in terms of technique and training
Right.
than you could ever consume. So a lot of this access at one point you kind of had to pay for somebody to come show you, et cetera. It's there, right? So there's no excuse as far as that goes. But, you start really light, you focus on doing things right, you're not trying to like get to the Olympics, right? Just take your
Right.
time and get through the movements, et cetera. But those multi-joint compound movements
Okay.
are the most important, right? One, because they're the most effective. Two, because they're going to give you the biggest return on your time, right? So that's what we want to focus on. If it's possible, it's great to have a trainer or somebody to come show you. Obviously, completely understand that's not feasible for a lot of people. It can be really expensive. But like a trainer kind of being the premier option. Small group training classes being another great option where it's like, it's not 40 people in a class, but a lot of gyms do offer now these small group trainings where it's, 5 or 6 people at a time. So you kind of distribute the cost amongst everybody.
Right.
Suddenly becomes much more affordable. And not necessarily going into it being like, oh, this is something I have to do forever. But even just getting a few sessions in of like, can you just show me how to do this so I'm doing it right?
Right.
It's a really great place to start.
That's great.
So I generally would recommend people start there. And if need be, the machines in the gyms have their place, right? You'll hear a lot of people, talk down on doing machines as opposed to free weights. Machines are really great for people who don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing. And they
Right.
have their place for people who are really experienced as well. But to just be able to get in there, get to a machine, look at the picture and be like, okay, this is how I do this.
Right.
And it drastically lowers the chance of getting injured.
Right.
By all means, it's a great place to start.
What about someone who they're traveling, they're maybe in a hotel room.
Yep.
I guess you've got hotel gyms, or they have limited time.
Yep.
What can you just do that might help out when you just can't get to a gym?
Yep. YouTube beginner home body weight workout, and you'll get 5,000 of them.
Wow.
Body weight squats, push-ups, bench dips, lunges. There's a ton that you can
Okay.
do, right? And, depending on where you are, beginner, advanced, you can get really, really straightforward ones. You can get really complicated ones. But there's really no excuse.
Right.
There's a space next to your bed that you can
Yeah.
use. You got 3 feet by 6 feet. There's plenty you can do.
Mhm.
And oftentimes that's what's available. You're traveling, you normally have your gym, you don't have time to, go to another gym because there's not one at the hotel. You get up, grab a cup of coffee, go through a body weight routine. And even if that's much less than what you're used to doing, the difference between doing that versus not doing anything at all is huge.
Yep.
Um, so I harp on people about that all the time. Even if you're not planning on going to the gym at all, but you're going on a 7-day trip or whatever, come up with a basic body weight routine, like 2 of them, 1 or 2 of them, you can look them up and just alternate between, but do them every morning.
Right.
Even if it just takes 12 minutes, nothing crazy, but that little bit every single day versus I just went 5, 6, 7 days without doing anything other than walking around where I was.
Right.
It's significant.
That's great. Yeah, that creativity. When I watch baseball, I do like push-ups between innings.
Right.
Just
Right.
simple stuff. Like it was, my brain, like, okay, I can do some push-ups during
Yeah.
so you can incorporate it anywhere.
One of the things I also emphasize to people too, and I always think it's a great opportunity early on when someone comes and says, I'm thinking about taking a GLP-1 or, hormone therapy, it's whatever it might be, particularly if there's a weight loss component involved with it. I like to ask them up front, can you define to me right now what enough would be? Right? I want to lose weight. How much weight, when you got to that point, would you be like, this is enough? I'm happy here. This was my goal. I weigh 210. I want to be 180.
Right.
I'd be happy at 180. That's a good weight for me. That's where I felt my best 10 years ago, whatever it might be. But what early definition of enough does is it helps prevent the kind of hedonic treadmill effect of, I want to lose 30 pounds. And then you lose 30 pounds and you're like, I need to lose 20 more. And then you lose 20 more and you're like, I still need to lose more. And it keeps, the goalpost keeps shifting on you,
Right.
shifting on you, where it's like, define what it is now, if there's a weight component to it, that we can work towards that and then build a lifestyle around that in conjunction with the GLP-1 that supports that.
Right.
Right. But anytime we're doing, and you see it kind of on the other side, especially you see this a lot with men and testosterone or hormones. I want to do a little something because I want to gain 10 pounds of muscle, and this will help me do it in addition to all the other things I'm doing. And then they gain 10 and they're like, I'm not big enough. I'm not big enough.
Right.
I'm not big enough. And, the goal just keeps moving and moving and moving, which it's not that continuous pursuit of growth or change isn't good. But what happens is, as human beings, we do a pretty good job of falling into that trap of where when we get to a goal, it suddenly just becomes the new normal and it's not enough.
Right.
And
Right.
it's not enough. You see it with money, you see it with weight loss, you see it with muscle gain, you see it with everything.
Everything. Right.
And that early definition of like, what am I really trying to get to? And have an actual defined target
Right.
helps, as opposed to it just being an open-ended, I want to lose weight. I want to make more money.
Right.
I want to get bigger. I want to be whatever it is.
Right.
with no goalpost, it just goes on forever.
Forever. Yeah. I find with the GLP-1s, people can tell me whatever they want to lose. And, it's good to set the goal. But the reality is, we're looking for where's your body going to find its healthiest place?
Correct.
Maybe short of their goal, maybe more than their goal.
Right.
So I try to get them to relax. Let's just stick to the habits we need to stick to with the GLP-1 and get to a place where you're very healthy,
Yep.
your sleep apnea is gone, your diabetes is gone, your glucose sensitivity is
Yeah.
back, you feel better, you can live your life at a much higher functional level.
Correct. Yeah, and obviously with those two, I mean, and most of the discussion happens around this with GLP-1s is obviously there's a there should always be a huge emphasis on the weight training and the protein intake.
Right.
Because obviously the conversation oftentimes comes to muscle loss, right? Um, and the way that we best combat muscle loss is through resistance training and adequate protein intake.
Right.
And for a lot of people, even if they incorporate the resistance training, and the truth of it is, it does point to if we want people to have the best information, the more you're doing, the better. 2 days a week, good. But really, you start getting closer to like 5 days per week, way better.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Definitely makes a very big difference. So we don't want to give people the sense of like, no, just do a little bit and you'll be okay.
Right.
A little bit is definitely better than none. But if you really want to kind of maximize the benefit of what you're getting, and for a lot of people that it can be tough to go from like, I'm not doing it at all to try to get to something like 5 days.
That's a little overwhelming. Yes.
It can
Start
be.
somewhere.
Start
Let's
somewhere,
build
but
from that.
make a real effort to continue to build on that, right?
Right.
But the challenge sometimes comes, I find more with that's not always a hard sell to people. The harder part sometimes is the protein intake,
Right.
right? Because they may not necessarily have, in almost all cases, the appetite that they had before. So there's not a constant kind of urge to want to go eating something and then say, okay, well, I want to go eat, let me go eat protein. Sometimes it's more of a reminder of like, I've barely eaten any protein. I need to make sure that I go get some in,
Right.
right? I ate a little bit of something this morning, but, it's 7 hours later, and I've got caught up in work and all of this. And that's true for anybody, right? When we're kind of prioritizing protein intake,
Right.
it usually takes a little bit of a shift in like needing to remind ourselves to make sure that it happens.
Yep.
But that can't be ignored either.
No.
It's really important.
I try to, I do the intermittent fasting where by 11 o'clock I'm ready for my protein. And it's just part of my daily routine. The protein's there with vitamins and just part of my daily deal. So, it's those daily habits. Once again, what you do every day is what is going to matter,
Right.
which goes back to what happens right now determines where you go in life and how healthy you are.
Yep, exactly. And just keep reminding ourselves that the goal is to be healthier. And all of this is part of it.
Yep.
We can't put all of the weight on a single tool to try to fix all of the things that it can't fix by itself.
Right.
And if we can continue to reinforce that to people.
Yeah. I stress that it's a program, it's a tool. But uniquely, prior to the GLP-1s, there were a lot of programs that were ultimate failures because patients couldn't lose their weight. But with the GLP-1 and the program,
Right.
You can really optimize your health. And to just take a GLP-1 without adding everything else, you're leaving a lot on the table.
Yeah.
I mean, we want the healthiest, maintain muscle mass, get your sleep,
Yep.
highest function person we can have.
Correct. Yeah. And that should always be the emphasis. And with, I know with the work that you do and when you guys are talking to patients, that's a priority, right?
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, for a lot of places, it's not, right? So anybody kind of exploring this route, if if no part of kind of the discussion or like what the company seems to stand for is anything other than how can we quickly get you a prescription,
It's
it's like,
crazy.
okay, then what's the real goal here, right? Are
Right.
you trying to make me healthier, or is it just about getting this in my hands,
Right.
right? Um, and obviously, I know with everything you guys are doing, this is absolutely about the well-being of the individual,
Right.
which is really important. You
Yeah,
know,
no, it's everything.
it's everything.
You know, why are you living your life?
Yeah,
I try to stress to everyone. And once again, it's an individual thing. I try to live my life as healthy as possible, work out, do the
yeah,
mindfulness training, and then help other people fill in any gaps they have. But when we evaluate patients that might want to lose 50 pounds,
yeah,
we make sure they understand the resistance training, weightlifting is going to
yep,
be really important.
yep,
Avoiding the ultra processed foods and getting your protein
yep,
with hydration and adequate sleep.
yep,
The whole program is everything.
yep. Yeah, and there's this kind of phrase that we use when we talk about like the financial wellness with people is this idea of money fixes money problems.
Right,
That's it.
right,
It's really good at fixing money problems, but money doesn't fix non-money problems.
right,
And I remind people with that, with anything from a supplementation or a medication standpoint, it fixes those problems. But these other things, it will never fix them,
right,
right? And if you're coming up with stories or justifications about how this is going to fix a problem that's unrelated, you're going to continuously be disappointed,
right,
right? And then just searching for what's the next thing, what's the next thing, what's the next thing. Um, but I think, anything that we can do, because a lot of the things we're talking about, exercise, sleep, mindfulness, gratitude, all of that. Part of the problem with is like, someone might be listening to this and say, I agree with all of that, but I don't know how to do any of that. Right. It's
right,
like those all sound important and I agree, but I just don't know where to start.
right.
Um,
I think that
I
that
think
is the
anything we
real
can
truth.
do, yeah, I
Yeah,
think anything we can do to be like, okay, great, you know, as a company acknowledging that and then also saying like, but we're not also going to leave you hanging. We're not just going to tell you, you need to go do all these things, go figure it out,
figure it
but to
out.
also
Right,
say, and here's some resources that we can provide to
right.
help you along that journey. What a
Absolutely.
difference that makes,
Right,
right?
for sure.
They don't have to go searching and wandering around and God forbid asking, looking to social media or something for the answers,
Right,
right? But to get like real sound advice and like, here's practical steps you can take in these other parts of your
right,
life. Where it's like, okay, great. This feels very supportive and structured now.
right.
Um, you know,
Because it'd be hard to argue against anything you've said, but how do I do it? Like, this is completely new for me. I'm
yeah,
50 years old. I've never done gratitude journaling. I don't even know where to start.
correct. No, absolutely. Yeah. So you have to provide that, right? And I think that's where a lot of, we'll call it medicine in general, falls short. There's a lot of kind of recommendations like you need to go do this.
Right.
Like you need to focus on getting better here and then that's it,
Sounds
right?
good. I have no idea what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah. You need to improve your sleep quality. Okay, yeah, I agree.
How?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Good luck,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, what do I do
Right.
now?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Having the tools in the program
right.
to really help people with those steps.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Lucas, tell me how you started Rebel Health.
It's kind of a long path. But it ultimately it ultimately stemmed from within a couple weeks of my first daughter being born. There was this first time in my life that I really understood what it meant to be present versus not present, right? It was this definitive moment of like, I know what presence is because what it was is like, okay, here's objectively, the most important people in my life is right in
Right.
front of me. And somehow I can't stop my brain from thinking about the meeting later, marketing plan, how am I going to pay for this,
Right.
Um, and it's terrifying to a degree because there's this sense of like, okay, if I can't stop this, 18 years are going to go by like that, and I'm going to miss 60% of it.
Wow.
Um, so what happened for me at that point is I got really interested and invested in mindfulness, right? Because of what I knew about its capacity to help us be more present more frequently. Um, and for me, it was largely, I'm an evidence guy, right? And, there was so much science on it at that point, because with the fMRI and all of our better understanding of what
Mhm.
mindfulness was really doing. Um, and I really turned towards it fully. And not only did it help with that, but I saw it start helping with a lot of other places in my life, learning to let go of the little things,
Yep.
being more grateful, moving on from a setback, and it started to show up in all these ways that, it became a non negotiable part of my life. Now, as a coach, because, the gyms and, I was doing all of that, people begin to ask questions, tell me more about this. I can see a difference. Why is
Yep.
this so helpful? So I went down the path of, becoming certified in MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction, ultimately finishing that with Brown University. Um, and then over time, taught some at the University of Miami, started doing a bunch of work. I started doing more private coaching, in the mindfulness front, but it quickly I quickly realized how difficult that was to do and coach that in a vacuum because of my background in all of these other places, the physical, the nutrition, etc. Because, you're talking with these people and you're sharing time with them and you're learning more about them. And it's like, yeah, we want to focus on being less anxious or less stressed, but you're also telling me about, what you're eating and how little sleep you're getting and how much you're drinking and you're not exercising. It's like,
Right.
we can't just focus on it's like what I was saying, like, this is one tool, but, like, all of these other things, if we ignore them, this isn't gonna matter,
Right.
right? Um, and it works vice versa, you need both.
Yep.
It's just like working with somebody, when you're trying to get them to eat better. If they're really stressed, good luck changing the eating habits of that person.
Right.
Very difficult to do, probably impossible, right? So you have to kind of, address all of these things together. Um, so for a long time, it was a lot of private coaching. And then it slowly began to shift into, the kind of corporate space that, I'd mentioned earlier as companies became more willing to invest in the long-term health and well-being
Right.
of their clients through coaching and consulting, et cetera. And ultimately, that's kind of how we landed where we are now. Um, Long weaving kind of process, but Rebel from the very beginning has never been about the kind of traditional, we're going to design a business plan and this is where we want to be in 5 years and this is where we want to be in 10 years. The first thing I ever did, with Rebel was I said, I'm going to host an introductory mindfulness workshop. And then I'm going to get feedback from people and kind of see what they're interested in and want more of. And it's been basically that process since 2016. You know, do something, get feedback, do something
Yep.
else, get feedback, and just let it naturally move into the spaces that it fits.
Right.
Because there's zero chance that I could have ever predicted I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing when I started it. I had
Sure.
no idea what it was going to look like. Is it classes? Is it workshops? Is it who knows? But just really kind of giving into it and just riding the wave of wherever it takes you, and not resisting it,
Right.
which is in a lot of ways, a very mindful way to kind of approach the
Sure.
development of the business. But it's worked out incredibly well. And it's always in service of what should I be doing that's going to be the most helpful to the most number of people.
Right.
And I find if I always come back to that as my measurement of whether I should do
You're
something or
good.
not, it always works. Right?
Absolutely.
Don't look at it through the lens of like what's the most profitable, especially if it's like a short-term profitable, but is this the right decision to be the most helpful
Right.
to the most amount of people? We always end up in the right place.
Yeah.
So,
Now that constant iteration and making sure that what we're doing as a physician for sure, Like, it's all about that patient.
Yeah.
I don't care the macro things going on. It is about that patient in front of me.
Yep.
And I'm always going to be doing what's right for them.
Yep.
And if you do that, you're going to be going the right direction.
And man, you sleep pretty good at nighttime.
Sleep great.
Yeah. And, so that comes back to what we were saying too, with just, being able to offer that additional support to people, to not give you one thing and then just hope you figure out the rest.
Right.
Right. And that's why, we're in the process of working towards, Rebel being able to provide your patients that additional support. Tell me what I need to be doing to sleep better.
Right.
What are the nutrition choices I should be making? All of these kinds of things. So we will be able to provide that to everybody as like this huge add-on support.
Right.
Of like, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do it right in the
sure.
pursuit of living a happier, healthier life.
Right.
Not just losing weight. The
Yep.
weight loss is part of being happier.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so depending on when, someone may be watching this, it may already be available.
Right.
But we're working on making that happen soon. And I think that's a huge differentiating factor.
Oh, for sure.
Right. There's a big difference because it really kind of, lets the people know that there's a different level of care involved here.
Right.
Not just how can we make sure we get you on a recurring subscription that's really profitable and
Right. That was
Right.
our goal, obviously, from the start
Of
with
course.
your era. We want to take care of the whole patient. Obviously,
Yeah.
I've been in weight loss for 20 years. Our team is taking care of thousands of people, and it's always about filling in the gap to optimize their health and function at every point.
Yep.
So working with you is going to be fantastic on both the physical side, but also the mindfulness presence side.
Yep, exactly. And they'll just ultimately get better results.
For sure.
Because every one of those things increases the how effective whatever it is that they're taking is going to be.
Absolutely.
As opposed, like we said early on, if you ignore all of those things, it's not going to work the way that you want it to.
Right.
So supporting everybody through the full process as much as possible in every part of their life.
Yep. Yep. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate everyone tuning in, and appreciate Lucas being here. And we always tell you this is not a substitution for true medical advice. You make sure you're being followed by a physician, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Everything GLP-1 podcast.